pick up next Wednesday. We'll have our singing next Wednesday, but then in 2 weeks we're going to be starting the book of Psalms, and we're going to be going through the different Psalms in our next quarter. But tonight we're just going to talk about an individual. We're going to talk about Joseph. And I've always loved Joseph. I love the story of Joseph. So go ahead and look at Genesis chapter 37. Go ahead and open there. Now, there's no way we can cover everything within 40-45 minutes of this man's life, but I just want to touch on a few things to help with this study. So we're going to be looking at primarily Genesis chapter 37 and 39. So we'll begin by reading chapter 37, verses 3 and 4. Now Israel loved Joseph more than his other sons, because Joseph was a son born to him in old age. And he made a long-sleeved robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not bring themselves to speak peaceably to him. We see here one of the things that we often think of when we read about this story, and that's the problem of parents showing favoritism to one of their children. And that is a real problem. Joseph, it says Israel showed more favor to Joseph. His brothers, how did his brothers feel about that? Yeah. Jealous, and so they did not like it. And it says they hated him. And again, that's his own brothers. And so it is a real problem. And I don't know that that's really the point that the writer here is trying to draw our attention to, but it certainly does become an occasion for conflict in this family. Jacob showing favoritism to Joseph. And so one thing we don't want to do is to make the mistake of the same thing. And we don't want to make the mistake of seeing a situation like that and blaming all the wrong people. A lot of commentators that I have read, especially when you get into the next several verses where it talks about Joseph's dreams, they'll say Joseph really gets what's coming to him. And I don't really agree with that at all. Now, maybe when you look at that, Joseph may have been a little bit more tempered, I guess, in sharing with his brothers the dreams that he had, which spoke of his rising position, his status over them. I mean, think about, here's a brother that is going to his other brother saying, basically, I'm going to be better than you, right? I'm going to be above you. I'm going to have a better status than you. And they didn't like that. But the thing I think we need to focus on most of all is the fact that his brothers, they're envy. They envy him, and their hatred of him is completely unjustified. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are. There's no reason that we have for hating a good person. We see people all the time. They're jealous of this person, or they're envious of this person. And so that's why they don't like that person. And we even see it in the church. Somebody, maybe gets up and does a really good job song leading, and somebody else wants to be a song leader, but they're maybe not as talented. And so they envy, or they're jealous of this person, and they end up just really not liking that person. And again, we can't have that attitude. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are. And there's one thing that certainly comes through in the story of the life of Joseph, and that is Joseph is a good man. There's no doubt about it. Joseph is a good man. He is a good person. And he is certainly unworthy of the hatred that his brothers have against him. He didn't deserve it. And so we see here the problem of hatred, the problem of envy that stems from the problem of favoritism. And I've seen families go through this, where one child tends to be favored a little bit more. Sometimes it may even be the youngest. The oldest is treated very strictly and harshly, and the youngest gets away with everything. And now the oldest is looking at the youngest, and they can't stand the youngest because they get away with everything. I'm always getting in trouble. I was told I can't do this, but they're allowed to do it. And I think all of us have heard of cases like that. Maybe we've lived it. Maybe we've had brothers or sisters that we feel like got some favoritism. And so we can understand where Joseph's brothers are coming from a little bit. But I want us to consider what envy drives people to do when they allow themselves to become consumed with hatred that becomes, envy for another person. They're capable of doing some pretty atrocious things, aren't they? Jealousy and envy, it leads people to do some pretty terrible things. And, we know about that as we come into the story, and you get down to verse 23. We see here that Joseph is clearly elevated, not only in terms of just favor and endearment by his father over his brothers, but now he's placed in a position of authority over his brothers. And that's really hard for people to take when the younger brother is given authority over the older brother. They don't like that. You think about the story of the prodigal son. What did that older brother, how did he feel when that younger brother came back and there was a great party thrown for him? You remember? Was he happy about that?
He was upset because he never got a party.
That's right. Yeah, he's like, I never left. I've stayed here. I've been the good son. He goes off and wastes everything that you've given him, and he comes back and he's getting a party, and and so you see that hatred for that younger brother, and we see it here with Joseph as well. And again, it's hard for people to take, but I think that's a pretty clear case here. The colorful coat that Joseph has is more than just a pretty coat. A coat of that sort was probably the symbol of his authority. It meant that he was one who was in the house and his brothers were in the field. They were hourly wage earners, the way we think of it. They were the hourly wage earners, and he is management. How many hourly workers do you know that just can't stand their manager? Why is he in a position, or why is she in a position of authority over me? I've been here longer, and so that's kind of what we've got here. And so they envy him all the more. And when they see him coming and they see that colorful coat, it says that they saw him at a distance. And it's probably that they can make out that colorful coat that he had. And so it was unmistakable. They knew exactly who was coming. And they probably noticed that before anything else. But look at Genesis chapter 37 and verse 23. Genesis chapter 37, verse 23. When Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped off Joseph's robe, the long-sleeved robe that he had on. Envy is a strange thing. It's sort of like covetousness in that we see that somebody else has something and we want it. We don't want them to have it, we want it. And in this case, it's with a malicious twist. And the malicious twist is that the covetous man just wants what the other person has. But the envious man really isn't so much interested in having what that person possesses as much as they are in seeing that person lose it. And I think that's what you see here. Envy is, I don't care about the coat, I just don't want Joseph to have it. And so there's that envy. His brothers, they didn't care about the coat. They just wanted to see Joseph brought down. They wanted to see their younger brother, in their eyes, humbled. They did not want him to have anything over them. And so they strip him of his coat. And we go on to see in the story that they immediately begin to conspire what they can do to him. And what do they decide to do, ultimately?
Threw him in a pit to start with.
Yeah, they threw him in a pit, but before that they wanted to kill him, didn't they? Yeah, they wanted to kill him. Now imagine that. This is their flesh and blood. This is their brother. And they're so envious, let's just get rid of him. Let's kill him. Where else do we see that in Scripture, in Genesis?
Cain and Abel.
Yeah, see, Cain was envious of Abel because God accepted his offering and not Cain's. And so Cain, that ate him up so much that he said, I'm going to kill him. And now you have Joseph's brothers doing the very same thing. We want to kill him. And it's only the oldest brother Reuben's intervention that prevents them from doing that. He says, you know what, let's take some time to think about this. Let's not act too drastically here, but let's think about this for a moment. And so they put him down into a well, and while that's going on, he's thinking of, how can I get him out of here? What can I do? And then some travelers come passing through, and they say, well, why would we want to lose this profit that can easily be gained in this situation? Instead of killing him, what did they decide to do? They sold their own brother. They sold their own brother. And he became a slave. And basically what they said is, we're going to be done with this. We're not going to kill him. We're going to get rid of him. We're going to gain a profit off of him, and he's no more. And so they decide to do that. And so that ends the first and opening chapter of this tragic tale so far. But I want us to keep in mind, because it is important in some of the things that we read about in chapter 39 of Genesis. When we come to chapter 39, we have this very interesting story about Joseph being taken down to Egypt, where he becomes a servant in Potiphar's house. And in Genesis chapter 39, we'll begin in verse 1. Now Joseph had been taken to Egypt. An Egyptian named Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and the captain of the guards, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him there. The Lord was with Joseph. Do you think during this time, Joseph may have thought that he was alone? His own flesh and blood, his own brothers were going to kill him. They sold him into slavery. Now he's away from his family. He's in Egypt. But notice, this is a tough time for Joseph. But notice it says the Lord was with Joseph. He never left him. And he became a successful man, serving in the household of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made everything he did successful, Joseph found favor with his master and became his personal attendant. Potiphar also put him in charge of his household and placed all that he owned under his authority. From the time that he put him in charge of his household and all that he owned, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house because of Joseph. So now you have an amazing turn of events. Sold into slavery, now he's with Potiphar, and he finds favor with Potiphar, and so now things are good. Things are looking up for Joseph. And again, think about the mindset. Joseph is just like you and I. Think about his mindset as he's living this. He's going through this. You have been, in just a matter of a very short number of days, swept away from being a favored son in your father's house to becoming a piece of property. Really. You became a piece of property that has been traded and sold a couple of times now. And then you find yourself in a foreign land. Your freedom that you had is now taken away. You are the possession of another person. Probably the language is different. The food may have been different. Everything is changing for Joseph. We would say culture shock. Culture shock. If you've ever traveled to foreign lands, you know what it's like when you first get there. Everything is different. You just kind of feel out of place. You're not used to it. You know, we're used to the United States. We're used to how things function here. When you go overseas, depending on where you go, it's completely different. It's completely different. And so Joseph lands in that situation. And I always wondered how he must have felt going through this. And how easy it would have been for Joseph in that kind of situation to do what most people do, and they start feeling sorry for themselves. But Joseph, we're told, excels in this situation. Why did he excel? God was with him. That's exactly right. God was with him the whole time. And I think sometimes when we go through difficult times, I don't think any of us have been through such a time as what Joseph went through. None of us have been sold by our family members. None of us have been a slave to someone else in a foreign country. You know, none of us have gone through this. But God was with Joseph, and he's with us no matter what we go through. And I'm sure there were times where Joseph felt that he was alone. And we'll see later on a comment that Joseph makes that he understood after all of this stuff had taken place. He could look back and say, now I get it. Jim?
Yeah, and you got to look at Joseph too, because with all this happening, he could have cried and fussed and, poor me, what's the use, gone in that direction. But he didn't. Mm-hmm. He stayed true to God, even though there's obviously difficult times. He's a slave now.
Yeah.
But he stayed true to God, and he put in an effort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, if we were to go through a situation like this, would we still feel that the Lord was with us? Or would we be saying, God, where are you? Why are you allowing this to happen to me? And I've been guilty of asking that question. I'm sure all of us have been guilty of, why is this happening to me? And we start to think, what did I do to deserve this? And God, the whole time, is saying, I'm still here. I haven't gone anywhere. I'm still with you. And how many of us have been through things in our life that when we're in the moment, it's tough. And it could be tough for years. But then you look back on things and you're like, oh, that actually made me stronger to go through that. We don't see it as we're going through it. God does, because God knows the outcome. He knows what going through this is going to make us. And he sees that here with Joseph. Many times as we serve the Lord, we want that burning feeling. And we've all had it. You know that feeling after you've been baptized, you're just on fire and you want to spread the gospel. And we go through life and we have good days and we have bad days, but we want that burning feeling. I'm on fire for the Lord. Everything is good. And that's the real test of our faith, if we have that powerful feeling that everything is going well. But I don't get the feeling that that's the feeling that Joseph had on this occasion. If anything, Joseph probably feels like the Lord has forgotten him. When you look at all these Old Testament men and women, even into the New Testament, but in the Old Testament, you see these men and women who felt abandoned. It was David who wrote, my God, why have you forsaken me?" David felt at times that God wasn't with him. Elijah felt at times that God was not with him. They all had that feeling, but one thing that I've always been impressed with is God never lashes out at them and says, "Where's your faith? I told you that I was here." He's always gentle. He was gentle with Elijah. What are you doing here, Elijah? And look at what he's doing here with Joseph. And so his brothers have turned against him. His father thinks he's dead. Now think about what his brothers did to their father. They brought his coat to him, had blood all over it, and now his father thinks that his son is dead. And so many would feel like God has just utterly forsaken me. Why would God allow this to happen? And so he feels, I think, probably he feels absolutely alone. And the reason why I say he probably does is because he is human. We can't look at these people as superhuman beings. They had the same feelings that we do. How many of us in here, raise your hand if you have never, ever, ever felt like God was not with you? I think we all have. We've all had that feeling of, where's God? And that's why I say Joseph, as a human being, probably had that same feeling. But he's not going to act upon the basis in which he feels. I don't ever see Joseph acting on that. He's not going to function on the knowledge that he knows that God loves him and that God is working something out. But I want to make this point of application. Don't ever try to determine the strength of God's commitment to you by the circumstances that you find yourself in at the moment. Joseph is a slave in Egypt. And the whole time God was with him. I want to skip it. Any thoughts so far?
He probably felt like he had to make it on his own because he was alone.
Yeah.
In a foreign country. So I've got to do whatever.
Yeah.
To make it.
Absolutely.
And he had a positive attitude about the whole situation.
Mm-hmm.
Because he advanced in
Mm-hmm.
Homer's house.
Yeah. Absolutely. Good. Very good point. Any other thoughts?
I think he must have had with all of the stuff that happened to him, that wasn't in his control, he did a very good job of, with his attitude anyways, because he does become the right-hand man.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, if he was all upset and didn't think God was with him and was upset at his brothers and holding a grudge, I don't think he would have been as successful as he was. I think he was able to put it aside and move on and, realize that he wasn't in control of that just things happen and make the best of the situation and move on.
Yeah.
Best part is he kept God above it all.
Yeah.
Even in his lowest points in his life.
Mm-hmm.
And he doubled everything that he had.
Yes. Absolutely. Good thoughts. Any other thoughts? Drop down to verse 21 of chapter 39. This is when Joseph ends up in a dungeon, right? It was bad, it was good, and now it is bad again. In verse 21, but the Lord was with Joseph and extended kindness to him. He granted him favor with the prison warden. When you think about that and you think throughout the Bible, you start thinking about people who were the very closest to the Lord. Those people who walked with the Lord faithfully, like Joseph did. Were their lives always characterized by sunshine and rainbows? No, not at all. Not everything just turned up nicely. In fact, every follower of God throughout the entire Bible suffered many different things. And so that's why sometimes when we've got to be careful that we don't start asking God why me? Because when we start saying, why me, what makes us better than all of these men and women? Why not me? Right? I mean, we're in a good company of people, are we not? That suffer through different things, knowing that God is with us. Again, you scroll through the entire Bible, and you find people that have been in a lot worse situations than we are. Jim?
Yeah, well, they go through the adversity, but they come out stronger.
Mm-hmm.
You know, better followers of God. You go through easy times laying on the couch doesn't make you stronger.
Right.
There has to be some kind of.
Yeah. If we love the Lord and we're doing our best to serve Him, the Lord is with us, whether we feel like He is or not. Sometimes our feelings betray us. We feel like God is distant when He's really not. Our feelings betray us. You think about, whether the test results come back to our liking or not, whether we get the news that our jobs, that, we're not going to be working there much longer, we're going to be laid off. Those things are not necessarily an indication of the Lord's favor or disfavor. But the question is, what is my level of faith? What is my commitment to God? And if we're trying our best, then we can walk with confidence that the Lord is with us, no matter our circumstances. And I don't know about you, but when I'm in the dungeon, if you will, like where Joseph is, I often find myself thinking, how could this ever accomplish anything of value? How many of you have ever thought, how can anything good come of this? Right? Again, I think we've all been there. We look at the situation and we think, how can anything possibly good come out of this? Well, could the Lord be doing anything of meaning and significance with this set of circumstances that I'm in? And then I remember again stories like Joseph. But then I also remember the worst day that ever dawned on human history. The worst day that ever dawned on human history was the day in which Jesus died on the cross. That was a horrific moment in history. And God took the worst thing to ever happen in the history of this world, and did He not turn it into the greatest thing? Think about that. The worst thing that has ever happened. God Himself in the flesh gets sacrificed, and God turned it into the greatest thing that has ever happened. Again, we don't see it all. We cannot see it all, but we have to trust in God who does see it all and who promises us in His Word that He is with those who are striving to serve Him, those who are trying to serve Him with a whole heart. Not half-heartedly, but with a whole heart. And that's certainly the kind of man I think that Joseph was when you study his life. As the Lord was with him, we begin to see that in the worst of circumstances, he begins to accomplish great things. Everything he does prospers. And so Potiphar is experiencing blessings because of Joseph, because the Lord was with Joseph. And everything is just going well for him because the Lord is blessing the hand of Joseph. If Joseph is diligent in his work and the Lord blesses that, then guess who's the beneficiary? Potiphar is. And Potiphar sees that. Potiphar says, hey, if the Lord's going to bless what Joseph does, then I'm turning everything over to him. So again, that says a lot about Joseph as a man. It says a lot about Potiphar too. Potiphar is a smart guy. He sees what's going on. And so he puts Joseph in charge of everything. And it's interesting that Potiphar even said he didn't even know all that he had. He didn't know. He didn't keep the books anymore. Joseph is in charge of it all. That's a pretty heavy responsibility. And he handed it off to Joseph. That's how much he trusted him. And that's why I think it shows the kind of integrity that Joseph had. Potiphar was a man who said, I can trust this foreign slave who has been serving in my house so faithfully that I'm just going to put everything into his hands. Because the Lord is going to prosper, and I can trust this man. And so the Lord does prosper him. He doesn't even know what he has, except when he sits down, that there's always food in front of him. He's got what he needs. Look at verse 6. Go back up to verse 6. He left all that he owned under Joseph's authority. He did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. So things have finally turned around for Joseph. Things have gone from good to terrible, back to good. And during this whole time, do you think Joseph probably would have preferred to be back home with his family? Sure. I'm sure he missed home. I'm sure he missed his family. I know he missed his dad. And so things are certainly better now than they were just a little while ago. But not only is Joseph a rising star here as he's successful, but he's also a good-looking guy. He's maturing. And he's maturing to the point that he is a physically good-looking guy. And so everything is going well for him. He stood the test of time when things were tough. But you know what I've discovered? One thing that I've discovered is that in life, a lot of times the people who are able to endure it while they're at the bottom are the ones who fall when things start going their way. How many sports figures, how many musicians, how many actors do we learn about who are good-looking, popular, wealthy, and they just can't handle the success? They can't handle it. Well, what kind of person is Joseph when that happens? How is he when he starts to become very successful? How is he going to deal with the temptation that comes with being successful and good-looking? Well, let's look at verses 7 through 15 and see what happens. After some time, his master's wife looked longingly at Joseph and said, "Sleep with me." But he refused. "Look," he said to his master's wife, "with me here, my master does not concern himself with anything in his house, and he has put all that he owns under my authority. No one in this house is greater than I am. He has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. So how could I do this immense evil, and how could I sin against God?" Although she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her. Now one day he went into the house to do his work, and none of the household servants were there. She grabbed him by his garment and said, "Sleep with me." But leaving his garment in her hand, he escaped and ran outside. When she saw that he ran outside, when she saw that he had left his garment with her and had run outside, she called her household servant. "Look," she said to them, "my husband brought a Hebrew man to make fools of us. He came to me so he could sleep with me, and I screamed as loud as I could. When he heard me screaming for help, he left his garment beside me and ran outside." And she goes on and repeats the same made-up story to her husband, Potiphar. She's a liar. But temptation comes. Temptation comes to Joseph. He's successful, he's good-looking, and now here's a woman that begins to notice him. And so he's got this robe on. The first robe of honor had been stripped from him, and now he's cloaked once more with the robe of honor, and she sees him standing there, and she begins to cast those longing eyes at this good-looking man. She begins to approach him with, I would say, a pretty brazen approach. I mean, she was pretty blunt in what she wanted. And so she just straight up tells Joseph, "I want you to sleep with me." Well, that's not like any situation today. That still happens to this day. There used to be a time when you really had to warn the young women about the sexually aggressive young men. And we still need to do that. But now we're living in a time where we also need to be equally working to encourage our sons to be mindful of the sexually aggressive women The woman here reminds me a lot of the woman described in Proverbs chapter 7. Remember the young man, it says there, Solomon says that he observes as he looks down from his window. This young man is devoid of understanding, this empty-headed young man wandering around, and all of a sudden as he walks along, out comes a woman dressed with the attire of a harlot. And she, with the same kind of approach that Potiphar's wife takes with Joseph, says to this young man, I want you to come and I want you to sleep with me. And she has all kinds of wonderful words and promises that she makes to him, and with her words she seduces him. She flatters him. And he is drawn into her net, not knowing that it's going to cost him his life. The sexually aggressive approach works. We can't fool ourselves. It works. It's not hard to find somebody that you can get to come and lie with you if you're a woman. It's really not. And you can go up and you can dress, the way the provocative woman dresses in Proverbs chapter 7, and you don't even have to verbalize it. You can simply make it clear by the things that you wear, because there's not enough of it there. It's not too brief, it's not too tight, and it's suggestive in one way or another. And so the offer is made, and you can find a young man who is going to take that. Guarantee it. They're out there. And so the thought that a lot of young women have is, I need to find me a man. And if you want to find a man, then you can find a man that way. It's not hard to do. It's not the right thing to do. But a lot of women, unfortunately, do that. You need to look at a man like Joseph. That's the kind of man you need to look for. That approach is not going to work with someone like Joseph. If you want to spend the rest of your life with the kind of man whose head can be turned in an instant by anyone walking around him, that's got the wandering eye, again, you don't have to look far. Because once you've got him, you've got him. But if you want a man like Joseph, you want a man of integrity, a man who will do what is right, a man who will be loyal to God, and therefore because he is loyal to God, he is going to be loyal to you, then you need to take an entirely different approach. And young men, the same thing. We need that wisdom that Joseph had. Joseph shows himself to be a true man. And I want you to notice the rationale that he uses. He says, how can I do this great evil and sin against God? Joseph is a young man. He's a young, good-looking man. He is now alone with another woman who is trying to flatter him and being very blunt in what she wants. Joseph could have taken the bait, but he didn't. He also says to her that it's not only a sin against God, but it's a sin against my neighbor as well. Who else is he thinking in this situation? Who else is he thinking about?
Like Potiphar.
Potiphar. That's exactly right. Potiphar has been good to him. And I'm not going to do something, first of all, to sin against God, but I'm not going to do this to this man who's been nothing but good to me.
Well, to be honest, where Joseph messed up, I mean, this woman sounds like she's been doing this for like weeks. Why didn't he mention anything to her husband?
Because during that time, the Potiphar probably, as he did, he took his wife's word for it. You see, he knew Joseph, and now Potiphar's wife goes to him and said, Joseph tried to do this against me, and he believed his wife.
But it says that she continuously did it for days, right?
And he kept turning her down.
The first few times, why didn't he just mention it to him?
Because he probably wouldn't have been believed.
It would have ended the same way.
Do what?
It would have ended the same way.
Yeah.
Because Joseph was still a slave.
He's still, yeah. And so if he goes to Potiphar and he says, hey, your wife has been making advances towards me, and he goes to her and she goes, that's not true.
He's been doing it to me.
Yeah, he's been doing it to me. Same situation. I think Joseph probably understood that. So he just kept saying, no, 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 no. And again, he didn't just walk away from it. He ran. We can do that with any temptation. We should do that with any temptation. Sometimes you may need to physically run away from it. And Joseph did that. And, I didn't realize we're out of time. But as you read the story, towards the end when his brothers, they come back to Egypt and they stand before Joseph, and Joseph forgives his brothers, but then he makes a statement and he says, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." You see how Joseph, it clicks? All that stuff that I went through, those times that I felt like God may not have been with me, all those times that I felt alone, He was always there. And now I'm stronger. You meant evil against me, but God took it and He meant it for good. God has not changed, and He still acts the same in our lives today. And we may get through difficult times and we say the same thing as Joseph. God meant this for good. I've benefited from this difficult time. I've benefited from these circumstances. And again, we've got to make sure that when we have the feeling, and we will have that feeling again, when we have that feeling that I'm alone, where is God? I don't feel Him near. We got to rely on the facts, not our feelings. The fact is, God says, "I will never leave you. I will never forsake you." And He means that. And so when you feel alone, when you feel abandoned, realize your feelings will betray you. God is still there. And in the end, God means everything for good. Any thoughts before we close, Bernard?
With every temptation, God will give you a way out. You look for it.
Absolutely.
Joseph, he took the way out.
He did. He did. He took the way out. He ran. It doesn't say he walked quickly. He ran from that situation. And once again, you have a situation where it was good, it was bad, it's good. He's in good favor with Potiphar. Now Potiphar's wife lies about him, and now he's thrown in prison again. Right? And then when you read on, his fellow prisoner said he would remember him. Well, he didn't. And so Joseph was left in prison. And again, things ended up working out for the good of Joseph. You talk about a roller coaster of emotions, a roller coaster of, his life. It's up, it's down, it's up, it's down, it's all over the place. But it ends, in a good place. Any other thoughts before we close?
I think it's a good idea to test the people that we surround ourselves with. Just like how Joseph did with his own family towards the end of that story. He tested his brothers and see what type of spirit they were in before he actually spoke up and said who he was.
Well, and another thing, too, is Joseph, you could tell he had already predetermined his answer to temptation. He didn't wait till he's put in a situation to say, should I or should I not? He said, no. I can't sin against God. How can I sin against God and do this to Potiphar? And then when it came time to run, he ran. He got away from it. So, all right. Like I said, next Wednesday we will have our singing, and then the following Wednesday we will start in the song.